Yeah. Family, y'all. Just keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. Oh, right. Yeah. Here we go.
Chapter 11. And it talks about the resurrection of Lazarus is going to lead to the death of Jesus. And so when Lucy was going over her chapter, she says, I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd will lay down his life for his sheep, right? So this is about Lazarus, and there's two gospels. One in the Gospel of Luke talks about Lazarus and the rich man, where Lazarus would eat the crumbs from his table. Not inside, but outside. And so when their final judgment came, Lazarus was carried to heaven, and the rich man that would give him his crumbs and leftovers, he wound up in another world. And in this one, Jesus is going to resurrect Lazarus. And the players are Mary, Martha, and they're all good friends of Jesus. And Martha and Mary also, they're going to appear in the following chapter, where they invite Jesus over 6 days after the resurrection, and she anoints, Mary anoints Jesus' feet with oil and dries them with her hair. But when they sent word that Lazarus is sick, he tells them that this is not going to be the end of his life, but it is going to be a sign so that the glory of God through Jesus, who is the Son, can be revealed. And so while Jesus is in Bethany, well, no, he's not in Bethany, he's close by, but before he goes there, he's out, and they send him word, and Jesus being the one that's nonchalant about what he's doing, because he knows he's the Son of God, and nothing's going to be impossible for him. So when they send word, he doesn't hurry up and take off to Bethany. So I think Vincent touched on it last week, that he's real casual about everything. So he stayed, after he found out, he stayed there 2 more days doing what he was doing. And so then he told his disciples that he's going back to Judea. And they said, but they just tried to stone you over there. You want to go back? And so, he says, yeah, my friend Lazarus, he's ill, and actually he's going to go to sleep. And they say, well, he's just going to go to sleep. But, they thought he was talking about taking a nap or whatever. And he'll awaken, in due time he'll awake, right? And again Jesus in this chapter talks about, he talks about moving around during the daylight hours, because, if the Jews are going to stone him. If he moves around during the day, he can, he's working in the light. He talks about light and darkness again. He says, aren't there 12 hours in a day where you can do things? But if you move around at night, you're liable to stumble, which, he refers to the light and the darkness again. So when they go back, he finds out that Lazarus is dead, And so when he arrives, Mary's the first one to go out and tell him that, his best friend Lazarus has passed away. And she said that, if he had been here, Lazarus wouldn't have passed away, And he says, but she also tells him that, that he is the Messiah, and whatever he asks of God, his wish will be granted. And so then she goes and tells Martha that, hey, Jesus is here. And here's when Martha approaches Jesus, she falls at his feet, and she says, Lord, and all this, and you're the Messiah, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And she lifts him up, and here's Jesus. He's feeling real good, because now they think he's the Son of God, right? She makes him feel that way. But then he tells them that, well, where is Lazarus? And before that, you know, you can refer that to when Martha laid down at his feet and worshiped him and asked him things, you know. That was kind of like the leopard, when the leopard went up and, you know, said, you know, heal me. And Jesus healed him, right? So Martha used the same approach, and, you know, he was way up here, right? And then what happens, it says, where is he? And so he says, he's in the tomb. And he said, well, let's go there. And then Martha brings him back down, and she says, but he's been in the tomb for 4 days. He smells. And so she knocks him off his pedestal, because here was, she said, you know, she called him the Son of God. He could do anything. But now she says, he's in the tomb. You know, he's already been dead for 4 days. He can't do anything. So she brought him way up here, and then she just got his feet from under him. The Jews had gone to Martha and Mary to their house, and to comfort, and, you know, everybody was crying. And then when Martha told him that, Jesus wept. But it says he didn't weep because of Lazarus. He wept because Martha had just put him back down, brought him back down to a regular person. You know, actually they thought he was a miracle worker. They gave him the sense of being a miracle worker more than the Son of God, that he was going to be able to work his wonders. And so, you know, they take away the stone, and he comes out, and all that, and so they believed because he called Lazarus out, and he calls him out in a real loud voice. So, you know, he makes note that he's talking to the Father, that the Father grant him that which, you know, God the Father do it for his Son. And so Lazarus came out, and if you can imagine, like what's that movie on the Walking Dead or whatever it is, you know, something like that. So, you know, when Lazarus comes out, you know, it's a new beginning for him. You know, he's been resurrected, but this is going to be the final sign that Jesus does in his ministry life, and it's the resurrection of Lazarus. And so, after all the Jews had seen all this, they go and tell the Pharisees, and the Pharisees go to, I think you call it the Sanhedrin, and that's a governing body. It's made up of like about 71. They call them sages. And that's supposed to constitute the Supreme Court and the legislative body for the Jews. And so they say, hey man, this guy's out here performing miracles, and he's doing this, and, you know, people are starting to believe in him. We got to do something about him. And they say, you know, next thing is the Romans are going to come in and take all of our benefits away from them. They're going to take away our land, and we're going to be under Roman rule if we let this guy keep on going. And so back in those days, they had a high priest, and the high priest, his name was Caiaphas. Anyway, and he had he had a prophecy that, you know, that Jesus would die, and that he would die for the unification of all the Jews, of all the Christian Jews. So, and he made the point that, hey, you know, if we get rid of Jesus, that'll solve our problems. You know, we won't have anything to worry about, because he's the one that's creating all these problems. So after the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, they all got together, and they said, hey, you know, from this day on, you know, there's a price on Jesus' head. So from that day on, they planned on killing him. And so after that, they were wondering if Jesus was going to come to the Passover. And they were hoping he would, because that way that would give him an opportunity to arrest him. So the resurrection of Lazarus is his final sign, and it leads to the Jews and the Pharisees deciding that, hey, we have to eliminate this guy. And that's short, but that's all I could muster up on a plane flight, so. Yeah, he was a problem.
Power comes from one of two sources in this world, either by organizing people or organizing money. What was Jesus organizing? People. He was organizing the people. The temple was a cult. I mean, it was organizing the people and their money, because they were coming to the temple and they had to pay certain things to the temple taxes in order to buy the animal sacrifice. Or the temple is organizing people and money, but now suddenly we have this man coming along who is becoming powerful. He's organizing people. What do you do if you're in power and someone else is growing in their power? Nice, you got to find ways to deal with them. So how interesting that this story really concludes the book of signs. We remember that we divide the gospel into these two major parts. The book of signs, 7 miracles. Got news for you. That was the last one. That was it. Because after this, the end of that chapter foreshadows how it is that the religious leaders of his day said with this act, you know what, this guy's got to be stopped. Which means that in the next chapter, chapter 12, we now begin with the book of glory, which is how Jesus is going to enter into his glory now. He's going to predict his death. He's going to come into Jerusalem. He's going to begin his Passover meal with his disciples in chapter 13, and it's downhill from there. So all of these signs that he's been working, we've already covered them in this course. Chapters 1 through 11, those are his signs. Now chapter 12 and on, it's preparing for his death. The Last Supper is going to take up several chapters here, and it's preparing ourselves for the roller coaster ride ahead. The glory is over. All those signs are over. A bit of trivia. What's the shortest sentence in the Bible? The shortest sentence in the Bible? It's in this chapter. John chapter 11, verse 35. The sentence in Greek is edokrisên, which is one single word. Edokrisên, the Greek word simply means he wept. Edokrisên. Jesus wept. Verse 35. He wept. Shortest verse in the whole entire Bible. There we have. Interesting story, because that whole theme of light versus darkness we see again in this chapter. Have we not seen that more than a few times? Light and darkness from the very first chapter, chapter 1, we have these themes of light versus darkness, and how it is that the darkness is not overcoming the light. And the darkness is not overcoming the light. But now, beginning with chapter 12, it's going to seem like the darkness is overcoming the light until the very end of the story, when we see that, boom, the light is not overcome. Even Lazarus, think of the image of being in a stone-cold, dark tomb. Is that the end of the story? No, the story ends with light, with Lazarus coming out into the light. The darkness will not triumph.
Well, I want to know how long Lazarus lived.
Well, they had a celebration like 6 days after, wasn't it, that they had a meal and they were partying?
Excellent question. Angelita wonders how long Lazarus lived, because the question is, so Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Is Lazarus still alive 2,000 years later? Celebrating his 2,000th and something birthday with all sorts of candles and cake. Imagine trying to blow out those candles. Or the church had various ancient traditions. So the Western church had one tradition, the Eastern church had another tradition. The Western church came up with the story, I was about to call it a myth, we're not going to call it a myth, but the story of how it was that Lazarus ended up sailing over to France with his sisters to the city of Marseille, which is a port on the Mediterranean, and how it was that Lazarus, they established a church there, and Lazarus was the bishop of Marseille. That's the story by the Western church. Is the Eastern church going to have the same story? In the Eastern church, he went over to Larnaca, which is in modern-day Turkey, and became the first bishop of Larnaca. So it's fascinating how it is that we have these two stories, both of them of Lazarus ending up being a bishop, but we don't have any stories of Lazarus' second death that I'm aware of. But we have stories of him going off and becoming a bishop either in France or in modern day Turkey. Is either of those stories true? They come down to us as stories today, and we will never know.
Maybe he did both.
Maybe he did both. Maybe he was not sure how that would happen.
I heard he played the role of a mummy.
The role of a mummy. Well, it's fascinating because we heard the word zombie mentioned before. Is it not from the Gospels that we get some of these images? When we read the stories of the Synoptic Gospels, how it was that when Jesus died, the dead were raised from their tombs. Okay, modern day images of zombies. Where do we find a lot of those roots? Even in our own scriptures. If the dead were raised from their tombs and walked into Jerusalem, what did that look like?
Different flock.
Are we to interpret that literally? Or is there some other way in which stories like that might be understood? That if Jesus really did die and was raised, God was breaking into history, then the dead had to rise in the Jewish mind. The dead are not going to remain dead. If you die, that's fine. When God is fully God at the end of time, you will be raised to life. That was the worldview that they had.